Hey guys, today we're going to have a look at metric units of measure, but as a prerequisite for this lesson, you should already feel fairly confident about converting different units of length, because we're going to use the knowledge that you have of metric units of length to convert metric units of area. So this you should be very familiar with. This is a metric conversion scale for different units of length like kilometers, meters, centimeters, and millimeters. The scale is based on a multiplication by base 10 numbers, that's multiplying by 10, 100, or 1,000, and so on, or dividing by 10, 100, or 1,000. As you can see from these arrows here, as we go down the scale, we multiply by base 10 numbers. And these little stars here are important because they help to show us how many steps we need to go down the scale. So for example, you should know that kilometers to meters is 1, 2, 3 steps. You'll probably have already memorized that 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. That's 1 kilometer times 10, 100, 1,000. That's 1,000 meters. Or you'll probably have memorized already that 1 meter is 100 centimeters, because from meters down to centimeters, I take 2 steps. So that's from 1 to 10 to 100. 1 meter is 100 centimeters. And these two units of measure are much closer together. It's only 1 step away. 1 centimeter is 10 millimeters. And it works the same way going up the scale, except that we're dividing by tens. So 10 millimeters divided by 10 is 1 centimeter. Or 100 centimeters divided by 10 is 10, divided by 10 again is 1 meter. 100 centimeters is 1 meter. Or 1,000 meters divided by 10 is 100, divided by 10 is 10, divided by 10 is 1. 1,000 meters is 1 kilometer. So this you should already know. So make sure you do know that before we move on. Now we're looking at areas, and areas you should know are measured by squared units. That is, they're measured by two-dimensional units of measure. The lengths along the sides of this square are measured in one-dimensional measures, just one direction. So they're measured in centimeters. But to measure the area that's filled inside this square, I need to use two-dimensional units of measure. So I use squares with a side length of the unit of measure that we mentioned. Now to find the area of a rectangle, we do length times width. This square is a special type of rectangle because it just has two sides which are the same length. So we're going to do the area of this square by doing length times width. Notice that that will tell us how many squared units it takes to fill the shape. This square with side lengths of 4 centimeter has an area of 4 times 4. 4 times 4, that's 16. That's 16 centimeters squared. Now we're used to calling these units of measure centimeters squared with the little 2 up top, but that actually does translate to being centimeter squares. See how I filled the shape with squares? Each of these squares represents 1 centimeter squared. It's a squared unit of measure. Notice that it takes 4 of these centimeter squares to make up a length of 4 centimeters. But it's not just a one-dimensional length, it also has an area inside it. It also takes a full of these 1 centimeter squares to reach out the width of this square. But the number of centimeter squares that fill the area inside the square is 4 times 4, that's 16 centimeter squares. So when I say 16 centimeters squared, I actually mean 16 centimeter squares. Now let's use this knowledge to convert units of area. If you're asked, for example, to convert 1 meter squared into centimeters squared, let's have a look at what that means. This is a meter squared. The side lengths of this square are 1 meter by 1 meter. That's what makes it a 1 meter square. To find the area inside it, we do the length times the width, which is 1 times 1, which is 1. Since I'm measuring in meters here, my two-dimensional shape inside here is meters squared. Now converting that to centimeters, a lot of people would just go ahead and say, I know how to convert between meters and centimeters, I just times by 100. That's true for lengths. To convert this length into centimeters, I times it by 100. However, to convert the area, that's a two-dimensional space. So we need to keep in mind that to convert between meters squared and centimeters squared, we use this conversion squared. I don't just times by 100, I times by 100 squared. And let me show you why. Because the area inside this square is not just 100 centimeters squared. It's 100 centimeters times by 100 centimeters, just the same way that the area in meters was 1 meter times by 1 meter. So the area of the square in centimeters squared would be 10,000 centimeters squared. That's 100 tiny little centimeter squares to fill up a length of 1 meter, and 100 rows of those centimeter squares to fill up this width of 100. And all together inside, we've got 100 times 100 of these centimeter squares. That's 10,000 centimeters squared. Now we could take this one step further to discuss volumes while we're here, although we're not really going to need it just now. It might be interesting to see that volume is a three-dimensional unit of measure. So to convert meters cubed to centimeters cubed, you'll think meters to centimeters I times by 100, but meters cubed to centimeter cubed, for a three-dimensional measure, we're going to multiply by 100 cubed. That's multiplying by 100 3 times. I need to multiply this length by 100, I need to multiply this width by 100, and I also need to multiply this depth by 100. So 100 times 100 times 100 is going to give me a volume of 1,000,000 centimeters cubed. That's 2 zeros for 100, 2 zeros for another 100, and 2 zeros for the third 100. So that's 6 zeros altogether, 1,000,000. So to convert from meters to centimeters, we times by 100. To convert from meters squared to centimeters squared, we multiply by 100 squared, which is 10,000. And to go from meters cubed to centimeters cubed, we times by 100 cubed, which is 1,000,000. Now here's some other metric of units to consider. So for the length, millimeters to centimeters, we divide by 10. To convert units of area from millimeters squared to centimeters squared, we're going to divide by 10 squared. 10 squared is 10 times 10, which is 100. Also from kilometers to meters, we know that we times by 1,000. So to convert from kilometers squared to meters squared, we're going to times by 1,000 squared. That's 1,000 times 1,000, which is 3 zeros and another 3 zeros. That's 1,000,000. Okay? In conclusion, to convert between metric units of length, you know the base 10 scale factors that we need to multiply or divide by. A scale factor is a good term for you, is a number that you multiply or divide a value by. So to convert between different metric units of area, we multiply or divide by that squared value of the scale factor. So if you're converting between kilometers and meters and you know you need to multiply it by 1,000, keep in mind that to go from kilometers squared to meters squared, you need to multiply by the squared value of that scale factor. So we're not just multiplying by 1,000 now, we're multiplying by 1,000 squared, which is 1,000,000. Or to go from centimeters to meters, you know you divide by 100. So to go from centimeters squared to meters squared, we're going to divide by 100 squared. And 100 times 100, that's 10,000. 2 zeros, 2 more zeros, 10,000. Okay? Let's go on to some practice of this. So here you've got some examples that you need to convert from one unit of measure to the other unit of measure. Here we're converting 3 kilometers into meters. These are just lengths, so this is just a bit of a warm-up to make sure you know these conversions. Kilometers to meters, meters to centimeters, and millimeters to centimeters. Then down here, we're going from meters squared to centimeters squared. Remember how you convert from meters to centimeters, and rather than multiplying by that value, you multiply by that value squared. So you multiply by that value once, and then you repeat the process multiplying by that value a second time. Okay, now everything from D onwards, you're converting different units of area. So remember that trick, remember that rule. I'm going to give you a minute here now to see if you can do that for yourself. If you need more time, go ahead and hit pause. Otherwise, the answers are coming up in 1 minute. Okay, you've had about a minute now. If you need more time, hit pause. Or if you need to ask me for help before you see the answers, please do that. Here come the answers now. That was just converting our units of length. Make sure you've got that right before you start checking the areas. If you need to go back, go back. Here we're starting to see the areas. Right, so check your answers. If you have any mistakes, go back and see if you can correct them. If you need any help, let me know.